Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for watching. If you're watching this in my Facebook group, and indeed, if you are watching the recording on YouTube or the audio recording as a podcast. So tonight, I wanted to give a focus around the link between stress and IBS symptoms, and then indeed what you can do about it. I'm recording this in April 2024. And April is known as both Stress Awareness Month and IBS Awareness Month. Now, there is a direct correlation between the two. Of course, there are other reasons why people may get IBS, but IBS is often and commonly triggered by stress. And I want to give an explanation around that. Now, we all lead incredibly busy lives. We've got 1,001 things we need to do. We rush around a lot. And unfortunately, stress comes at us from many different angles. We lead far more stressful lives than we ever used to. We try and cram so much in. That can add to overwhelm and additional stresses in our lives. And then you couple that with stresses to do with family and finances and work and health matters. And you can see why stress becomes overburdened and it sort of tends to take over our lives. Now, we know stress has many implications on the body and a lot of health implications, but not so much is understood as to why this impacts the digestive system. And this is what I wanted to give a bit of an explanation about first of all. We understand that the stress response is known generally as the fight and flight, or fight and flight reaction. It came about as cave dwellers when we had to run away from danger, fight an animal, and then we'd retreat back to our caves, and we were cavemen. And so stress was very manageable in the respect that we were either having to utilize a stress response and put it into action, or we could escape from that stress response and go into a calming environment. And so, as we know, the stress response, which is part of the sympathetic part of our nervous system, is known as fight and flight. The opposite side of our autonomic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic, is known as rest and digest. And we shouldn't spend more than 5% of our day in the sympathetic fight or flight reaction. We should spend 95% of our time in the parasympathetic, known as rest and digest. So you can start to see where problems could start to arise, that we're spending so much of our time in the fight or flight, not enough time in the rest and digest. And so the parasympathetic, the calming arm of our nervous system, is when we can digest our food. And it's like that for a reason. If you imagine going back to our hunter-gatherer caveman type days, when we needed that stress response to keep us safe and out of danger, then all our resources and our energy was put into just that. Heart rate would rise, the blood would start pumping, we needed energy for our muscles, we needed to get more oxygen into our lungs to get it around our body. And at times like that, there is no reason why we would need to be digesting our food. Digesting food is when we were safely back in our caves and everything was calm. And that at that point in time, when we'd hopefully killed the animal that we were then going to eat, we could start to digest our food in the right manner. But that's not life as we know it today. So why is it that stress has such an impact, hence the impact on not this rest and digest phase? So it's putting all its attention, all its energy into all those activities, physiological activities that the body needs to keep us safe and out of danger for fight or flight. And therefore it hinders digestive secretions. That's the crux of the problem to start with. So we have an enzyme in our saliva, for example. If we're very stressed, we might find we get a dry mouth. So there's not so much saliva, there's not so much of the enzyme called amylase that starts the digestion of our plant food. If we're stressed, we might be eating in a hurry. If we're eating in a hurry, we're not chewing our food well. If we're not chewing our food well, that's also going to compromise the release of an enzyme in the saliva. The next phase of digestion is in the stomach. The stomach has to be a highly acidic environment. And if digestive secretions are compromised, either because of a lack of chewing action, lack of salivary amylase, which helps to trigger the release of stomach acid in the stomach, but equally it's not being released because the body thinks it's in stress mode and it doesn't need it, then that's going to reduce the amount of stomach acid, and that's going to have an impact on breaking down food, predominantly protein foods in the stomach. Everything gets churned up in this acidic environment, and therefore it can affect other parts of the foods that you're supposed to be digesting too. And when food leaves the stomach, it should be really acidic. It's called chyme at that stage. It's not directly food, but just think of it as food. Should be highly acidic. But if it's not come from a highly acidic environment because there's not enough acidity there, that can then hinder the release of enzymes from the pancreas and bile from the gallbladder, the third stage of digestion. So what can happen with all of this? Well, you've then got a situation where food hasn't been properly broken down. Food can then pass through the digestive tract. It's partially digested. It can start to feed pathogenic bacteria. Those bacteria ferment the food. They give off gases. That creates wind. It creates bloating. You can get a buildup of bacteria in the wrong place, like the small intestines, which creates bloating there, known as SIBO. You can then get cramping. It can impact your bowel movements. It can create a lot of wind and flatulence. If you can't digest food well in your stomach, you could start to get a bit of acid reflux. Very commonly not due to too much acid. It can be very commonly due to not having enough. We can get indigestion. We can get a feeling of heaviness and fullness. And all of this all stems from too much stress impacting the ability to release digestive secretions. We also know when we're stressed, we have this direct link with the enteric nervous system between the gut and the brain. And if the brain detects we're stressed, we can get too much serotonin released. Too much serotonin can impact on the gut. That can lead to loose stools if we're very, very nervous and very, very stressed. It can just upset the whole digestive system even more. So whilst IBS is not solely due to stress, stress has huge repercussions on the digestive system. And if stress is short term, it's not going to cause you much harm. It's short term. You might experience some symptoms, but they will very quickly go away. The problem that can arise is if stress becomes quite chronic, or we don't try and take some action to calm that stress response before we start eating our food. And therefore, we can get into a situation where, because you've got partially digested food, can feed pathogenic bacteria, it creates an unhealthy environment in the gut that can lead to a greater amount of pathogens. We could get a knock-on effect from stress that we also know about impacting our beneficial commensal bacteria, allowing space for more pathogens to grow and thrive. You can see how this vicious circle can start to develop over time. Now, of course, we can't take away all the stresses in our life. That's just not realistic, is it? I understand that. But there are certain things that you can do to try and calm the stress response. If you know you're experiencing a lot of stress, then when you sit down to eat a meal, as much as you possibly can, try and pause before you start eating. Don't rush out down to sit at the table and to try and start eating before you've tried to sort of collect yourself, before you've tried to sort of calm the stress response down. And one of the first things I recommend a lot to my clients is the very simple act of doing some deep breathing. When we do deep abdominal breathing, and we only need to do a few repetitions of that, whether it's a very easy deep breathing in for a count of 4, breathing out for a count of 4. Some people like to do what we call box breathing, when we think of it like a box, where we might breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and repeat. all of these actions really help to calm the stress response down, and it helps to switch the autonomic nervous system from the sympathetic arm to this parasympathetic for rest and digest, to enable the digestive function to work optimally. So that's a really simple thing that you can do. It's not something that you need to spend ages doing. Honestly, trust me, just repeating a few repetitions of that is very calming. Now, if you're in an environment when you've got a lot of mouths to feed, maybe small children, if you are able at all to take yourself away from that situation before you sit down at the table, to try and compose yourself, even if you just say you're going off to the toilet, that enables you then, well, mum's gone to the toilet, I can, that's an understandable. It's not, what are you doing, mum? Where have you gone? So just try and do that before you then sit at the table. And of course, sitting at the table and away from the gadgets, trying to eat more mindfully, trying to slow it down and chew your food a little bit better, and not rushing through the meal and gulping it down, of course, is also critical. But the other things that you can also do that can be really, really helpful to calm that stress response is something known as tapping, also known as emotional freedom technique. There are lots of sites that you can look at, whether it's on Instagram or websites that are out there. EFT and tapping, and it's where we tap on certain Chinese meridian points. This is known as the stomach meridian, and we tap on these points and repeat it several times. And just even if you don't say anything to yourself about this, which you can learn to do, and when you go on websites you can start to look at this, things that you can say to really calm things down. But just the motion of tapping, and it may seem very odd what I'm doing right now, but actually this motion and repeating it and going over it several times is really, really helpful, even if you don't say anything at all. So have a look on YouTube, Instagram, websites, look for emotional freedom technique, known as EFT, also known as tapping, the tapping solution. There's some very good guides out there and some very simple things that you can do. Again, very effective at calming that stress response down. Something that you might be able to do before you sit down and start eating, maybe go for just a very short walk while you're waiting for food to finish cooking. Just a short walk outside, or getting out in your garden if you've got a garden, trying to breathe again more deeply, get some fresh air into your lungs, looking at nature if you've got that around you, very, very helpful. Maybe a little bit of visualization or meditation, just closing your eyes, again, a little bit of deep breathing, and just visualizing yourself being in a calm, relaxing place, space, somewhere that you like to go to, that is your happy place, somewhere you find very calm. If you can just visualize that for a few moments, is also very helpful. Maybe listening to a little bit of relaxing music. At times when I'm stressed, that's when I do put on a little bit of classical music, classic FM, Radio 3, whatever it might be, maybe something on Spotify, maybe it's a track you like that again, your happy place, it's very, very calming for you. These things are just all helpful, and it's finding the one that works for you. First and foremost, that deep breathing is the one I go to because it's something you can practice easily, any place, anytime. But you need to do something that is going to calm that stress response down before you start eating your meal. And I promise you, just taking those actions is something that you can do whenever you feel stressful, but particularly if you do suffer from IBS. And your IBS is triggered more when you're feeling stressful, then please attempt to take these actions before you start eating your meals, or indeed at any other time of day, because sometimes cramping and things can appear when we're feeling stressed because of this gut-brain link and the enteric nervous system. Try and take yourself away and try and implement some of those stress relieving techniques. As I said, it doesn't need to be half an hour, 20 minutes, 5 minutes might be all it needs to put you into that calm space, calming everything down to help alleviate those symptoms. So I hope you found that helpful tonight. Thank you for watching, for listening, wherever you're catching up on this. Please leave me some comments. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Peyton Principles Natural Health. If you're watching this in my Facebook group, please go over to my YouTube channel, Peyton Principles Natural Health, where I've got well over 300 videos now, lots of different topics for you to watch. So thank you so much, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.